at URock with John Jameson. John, are you with us today? John Jameson?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
But we decided to just go ahead and let it stay a virtual meeting, Bobby, just because of the cold. So,
Okay, thank you. So it doesn't matter. Great. Thank you so very much. But we decided to do it 100%. And I know that John was thinking at one time of doing it at URock because he felt very strongly about sometimes people like to gather, and that's okay too. But we wanted to make sure that we had a strong virtual component because there are people who are afraid to leave, not just because of the cold. And we wanted to make sure that those people would feel comfortable coming on to this virtual site and getting information, as much information from us. And I'd like to also say thank you to John Jameson publicly because he and I were having a discussion about the importance of this gathering, and he and I were talking, two and three times in planning, and then I got with the others, and so that is very important. And just so you know, that we have all of our leaders here, our Northside leaders here. Of course, you'll hear from Representative Abaje later, as well as Representative Fu Lee. We are also pleased to have with us Council Member Vita and Council Member Warren, because we all constantly try to work together for the betterment of our district. Just to give you a roadmap before we get into some other things, our guests, as you probably heard, and some of the speakers that you'll hear from, and you'll be able to ask some questions. We have both questions from on Facebook. You may have saw that we posted asking people what are some of the questions they would like to have answered, and we have those, and some of those will be answered as well. But if there are some questions that you want to ask live, there are two things that I ask. One is that you use the raise hand button, and two, that if you have a question, that you succinctly ask your question because we want to give time for a response, but also create more time for people to ask questions. So we're here today, and not necessarily in this order. I'll get the order to you as we go forward. One is Paul Sullivan, as you heard earlier. He's with the ACLU, and he's going to talk about knowing your rights because we think knowledge is power, and he'll be able to talk us through that. We're here, Karen, and if the Attorney General pops on from the Attorney General's office, we'll certainly hear from him. Karen, talk about the lawsuit and what's going on as far as that is concerned. Commissioner Barnett is here, Todrick Barnett, who is the Commissioner of Public Safety for the city. He's also a former judge, and so we'll get a chance to ask him some questions or hear his presentation as well. Jordan is the Chief of Staff for the Department of Public Safety. He'll talk today as well about some of the critical issues around the investigation. Some people ask questions like, why can't ICE be arrested? We're going to get into those. And some want to ask a question about immunity, so we want to make sure that we answer that. Bantu is with us from North Point, as who will talk about food, because we know that there's been some questions around that and whether food can be delivered or if it's being delivered or if there's any other way that people can help. And Viviana Salazar will also be with us if she's not on yet, where she has been a community champion, and we'll talk about food, DOPAs, which is Declaration of Parental Authority, and power of attorneys, any of those things, so we can talk about how we can empower each other. And then you'll hear about um, what legislation or proposals are some of us are looking at, putting forward later on. So that's just kind of a roadmap, guiding principles. I'm asking that we must work together to achieve victory. That requires us to give each other space to work and room um, to design an approach that seeks to help each other. I'm asking that in our conversations here, that we respect each other and have respectful interactions. That's even if you agree or disagree with something. There's a way that we know in our Senate district that we respect each other and talk to each other because we understand that we all are in this together. As I mentioned earlier, if you have a question, please try to be succinct and provide our guests a chance to answer and for your neighbors to be heard. So just quickly, I'm going to turn and see if Representative Bajay wants to say welcome. And before we get there, so we'll go from Representative Bajay just saying welcome, and also Representative Fu Lee. And I'm just recognizing our city council members because they said that was okay. Representative Bajay, just brief welcome.
Thank you so much, Senator Champion. And it's really good to see everyone online today. Really just want to acknowledge the heaviness that we've been dealing with since December, but particularly in this past week with the killing of Renee Good and the incursions of ICE on the north side, at least a couple of big profile events that have happened. I hope that this can be a time period where we can share resources with each other, we can share how we can work together and how we can keep up our resiliency. This is the time for us to grow closer together. And I hope that we will continue to stand strong against this federal government that has completely acted unlawfully, and show everyone around the world not only what Northsiders are made of, but also what Minnesotans are made of. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Representative Baja, and that's so true. That one of the things that I believe the Trump administration is trying to do is divide us and find ways for us to turn inward to criticize each other as opposed to us working together. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Senator Champion, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Really appreciate all of you being here, and just know that this is a critical time for us. And Senator Champion actually reached out, and we had this plan before what happened in our community just a few days ago. And so just know that we are here to listen to all of you. If you have any suggestions on what we can do going forward, let us know. I think it is important for us to know that the legislative session is coming up here not too far away next month. And so we are thinking about how we could really move forward, and hearing all of you and saying how could we get ICE out of here, but at the same time figuring out ways that we could address some of the critical issues in our community. And so really looking forward to hearing the conversation and all of your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I did see in the chat that someone says others want to join, and we're at 100 right now. And Shamika is checking on that capacity and seeing what we can do in order to deal with that in real time. So, with that being said, I want to start with the Attorney General's office. We know that they made a big announcement, and we would like for Karen to introduce herself and what she does, and talk about that lawsuit and anything else she thinks we need to know that will continue to give us the power and strength that we need as a community. Karen.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Senator. Good morning, everybody. My name is Karen Moratz. I'm the Senior Advisor for Policy and Special Projects in the Minnesota Attorney General's Office. I also just want to say I'm joining you as your neighbor. I live in Ward 4. I have a kid at Franklin Middle and one that graduated from Camden last year. And so I share a lot of your concerns and experiences this morning. And I'm here to share some information about the lawsuit we filed this week that many people have heard about, and also to share a new tool that we would like the community to help us with. So the first thing is that we did file a lawsuit earlier this week. The lawsuit is against the United States Department of Homeland Security and a number of individuals named underneath. And the goal of the lawsuit is to end what we consider an unlawful, unprecedented surge of federal law enforcement agents into Minnesota and the harmful impacts they're causing. Our lawsuit alleges that the obvious targeting of Minnesota is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law. Our lawsuit alleges that the surge's reckless impact on our schools and local community groups and law enforcement are a violation of the 10th Amendment and the sovereign powers that the Constitution grants to states. We also allege that Department of Homeland Security's excessive and lethal force, their warrantless racist arrests, and their targeting of our courts, churches, and schools are violations of the Administrative Procedures Act ban on arbitrary and capricious federal actions. We believe that this is a very legally sound lawsuit, and that the arguments that we make are incredibly strong, and there's precedent for all of them. But our lawsuit, to some, it asks the courts to end the surge of DHS agents into Minnesota, and we ask the courts to end DHS's unlawful behavior in our state. We believe that we don't believe, we know, because we've read the Constitution, that it gives us the right to pray however we want, to protest to vote for whoever we want, to be who we want without fear of being racially profiled, assaulted, or killed in our communities. And we are defending those rights with this lawsuit.
Okay.
Sorry?
Karen, can I jump in just for 1 second? I'm sorry to do this to you. Will you put a pause right there because I neglected to call on the chief of staff from the Department of Public Safety because he has to leave
Oh,
at a certain time because you know of all the things that are going on um, in our city. So will you be so kind as to do that, and we'll pick right back up where you left off if that's okay.
I always appreciate Jordan's time, please. Yeah.
All right, Jordan, you're up, my good friend. Can you tell us about the latest state of the investigation? What has been the challenges around the investigation? And I think you guys also are in charge of at least interacting with the National Guard because there were some questions about that and anything else that you think we need to know. So, Jordan, thank you for being here because I know the commissioner wanted to be here as well as Drew as well, but because of what's going on, they could not be here. But you are a great substitute. So, Jordan,
Yeah,
introduce.
thank.
And if you have if you could put on your video, that would be great.
I am very sorry. I am in my car and I just pulled over, so I'm going to try not to because it'll,
Okay.
I think, distort my voice as
Okay.
well. So what I want to do is thank you for the time. I am sorry I have to interrupt this group, but I want to try to get information out to everyone. I will also say that the elected officials here, senators and representatives, have my cell phone number. So if there are follow-up questions that need to happen, I'm happy to take those. For the National Guard, I can start there because they will be a little more visible today. The governor has activated the National Guard. We will be using a few guardsmen to support the Minnesota State Patrol today. So it is possible you will see them. Those members of the Minnesota National Guard are under the control of the governor and they are paired with our state troopers. So that is different than anything else you've heard about any federalization. As you also see around the investigation in our BCA team, on the shooting of Renee Good, the BCA was kicked out of that investigation by the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have offered to do parallel investigations, joint investigations, or just give us access to the evidence so we can do a fair investigation. We have been denied. What we are doing is we are working closely with the county attorney's office and the Minnesota Attorney General's office to collect whatever evidence we can and categorize that and put it together. So at the very least we can save it and to allow those attorneys to do what they are able to do with that material to try to get justice. For the shooting that happened in all of your communities, the BCA crime scene was deployed. We sent our team there right away to not get into the same situation we had before where we did not have evidence. And our team worked to collect evidence that night along with the federal investigators. We worked side by side or in some cases around each other, but to ensure that we can provide the investigation that we need to into that incident. We are hoping we have enough information there and we'll get cooperation from the federal government to allow for them for us to do a complete and thorough investigation. That is a really quick update, but Senator Champion, is there anything else you'd like me to hit on before I have to leave?
Yes. Can you clarify the immunity question? Because some people were asking about this immunity, whether ICE agents have immunity or qualified immunity, or what does that mean? I know that you are not the legal, but as much as you can share about that, that would be great. And I know that we could also ask Commissioner Barnett as well.
Yes, absolutely. I can start that question. The easy answer to say is that federal agents do not have absolute immunity, as was said by, I believe, the vice president shortly after the shooting of Renee Good. That said, there is certainly a supremacy clause of the federal law trumps state law, but our state investigators still have a right to the data. Our county attorneys and our attorney general's office certainly have the right to do investigations. But there is more complications that I will let the attorneys talk about between federal and state law. Federal agents do have something similar to what state law enforcement or peace officers have and qualified immunity, but it is slightly different that I can let the attorneys get into.
And then, George, some people are always asking, why is it that the police department and others are not able to arrest ICE agents? Or I've also heard other people say, why don't you just arrest ICE agents? Can you speak to that question?
I can, and I'm sure others can as well. State law enforcement cannot obstruct federal agents. If they do, they are themselves will be subject to arrest. And I want to call out what has been reported in the news, that there are more federal agents here than I believe we have local peace officers in the state. There are, over 3,500 federal agents here. Statewide, we have around 500 some state troopers. So it is a challenging time, or the numbers there, just for context. But yeah, we cannot arrest agents if we believe they are doing federal duties. That said, they are not immune from arrest. I know in Bloomington, Minnesota, an ICE agent was arrested as he was part of a child sexual abuse material down there. So you can arrest them on state charges, but it is not quite as simple as it could be, or we've been asked for it to be.
And then maybe one of my final questions, and then I'll see if there's one more burning question. Does ICE have the right to set up checkpoints just to stop cars as they did on Lake Street?
So I will let the attorneys probably dig a little more into that, and we deal with our highways. The legal right is challenging. I would say our state troopers do not, and we advise against it because it's incredibly dangerous on the highways. But I'll let the attorneys talk about the legality of setting up checkpoints, probably to make sure I don't misspeak.
And then we know that you guys have some auspices over the National Guard. A question just came in asking, can National Guard officers make arrests?
Oh, that is a great question. National Guard right now in the state of Minnesota under the governor are under something called Title 32. They cannot make arrests. They do not have that authority. That being said, as I think you've heard the president and the federal administration talk about the Insurrection Act, then federal troops would be given different power and they could make arrests, and those troops would be under the Department of Defense and the president versus the governor. But right now, National Guard cannot make arrests, but they are there to assist our local law enforcement and our state law enforcement. So it's a distinction between if they're under state control or if they are federalized. That is the differentiation.
And are you making that difference based on if the president invokes the Insurrection Act or not?
Yes, that is correct. So if the president invokes that Insurrection Act, that would give federal troops far more power, including potentially arresting Minnesotans.
And just so the folks know that the Insurrection Act is something that the president can invoke at any time. He has wide discretion. And if that was to happen, the National Guard becomes under the auspices and control of the federal government. Am I correct about that, Jordan, or is there anything else that you want to say about that?
You're generally correct. State law enforcement would stay under control of the Department of Public Safety, but yes, the National Guard, those not deployed by the governor, would be under the control of the president.
All right. Any other quick questions before Jordan has to go? And Jordan, I want to thank you for being patient. I just want to see if there's any quick questions that has not been asked that someone might want to ask. Anyone? I don't see any hands raised. So Jordan, is there anything else that you want to share with us in parting about DPS and what you're doing, what you may see as a growing problem going forward? I think I see one from a Sandy now.
Sandy.
Can you turn on your camera? Sandy, can you turn on your camera and ask your question?
Sorry, and I can see Sandy's question about showing ID if they are stopped by ICE. I will probably encourage talking to attorneys on this call, but I'm not sure if ICE is even accepting driver's licenses as forms of ID. And I also do see a question about any good news to share. I can share, and I'm sure Commissioner Barnett can share as well. We believe that law enforcement has a good plan for today to keep people safe. It is comprehensive between the state and the local government led by MPD, and a lot of great work that they are doing. So we're there to support them. But I do believe today can go smoothly. So I ask that all of you feel free to go out and express your First Amendment rights. Do so safely. I know today could be a contentious day in the city of Minneapolis, given who is there. But I just want to make sure that we are prepared for that along with our local partners.
Quickly, Luke, can you ask your question quickly before we go to Kathy, and then let Jordan leave?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for letting me ask my question. Short of arresting federal agents, can MPD and are there any plans for MPD to start issuing traffic or other citations for reckless driving, for example, or driving without a plate, as has been well documented? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Luke. What I can say is I can't answer for MPD, and I can let Commissioner Barnett do that. But for the State Patrol, if we see vehicles driving recklessly on our highways, which is where the State Patrol has jurisdiction, we will pull them over. And unless ICE or federal officials are doing their official duties, they can be given tickets. Same with license plates. If we see vehicles, especially unmarked law enforcement vehicles, going down. Plates that we do not recognize or no plates, state troopers can pull them over. It is harder to do after the fact, and we have jurisdiction on the state highway system, not on local roads from a state perspective.
And it's my understanding, just so you know, that the commissioner of the Department of Public Safety did send a letter to um, the administration saying that that ICE needs to stop switching license plates, and if they don't stop doing it, that they could step in around license plates. Can you correct me if I'm wrong about that, Jordan?
You are absolutely correct, Senator. We sent a letter directly to Secretary Nome around that point that if they continue to misuse our plates in Minnesota, not only will we pull their plates, we will kick them out of any programs we have as part of that ongoing.
All right, Sandy, I'm sorry, Kathy, your quick question, please.
Yes. My question is, so the president doesn't need the permission from the Senate or Congress to evoke that interaction?
Jordan.
That is a great question. My understanding is no, he does not. That is power that he has to do. The only place that could stop them, the Congress could if they voted together, but otherwise it is the judicial branch that would have the ability to stop them if, as Minnesota would likely file a lawsuit, depending on what he is claiming.
That is correct. Jordan, thank you for that. I was asking you just so you could give us any last comments that you think that we should know if there's a question that I did not ask that you think would be important and pertinent.
Just really appreciate the time. As I said, Senator, you and the electeds here have my number, so please feel free to reach out to make sure we can keep this community updated. It is important for everyone to stay safe, and I really appreciate the time today, so thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, we're going to Karen. Karen, let me just say openly again, thank you so much for your patience, and thank you so very much for the information that you've provided up to this point. You may continue. Thank you, Karen.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, I will finish up by just saying a couple of things. One is that some folks have asked us about the timing of our lawsuit. We have our first hearing next week, which is on the motion for a temporary restraining order, which, if granted, would force DHS to withdraw its surge while the case makes its way through court. I know some of you are going to have questions about the injunction that was granted yesterday, which is in the ACLU case, and I know Paul is here from the ACLU, and I know he will be able to share about that. But that is the timeline on our case. The last thing I want to say is that you may have seen an announcement that our office has created a form for Minnesotans to use to share information about the impacts that these federal actions in Minnesota have had on them personally, or that they've personally witnessed. As soon as I'm done talking, I'm gonna put a link in this chat to that form. For those of you who know about civil lawsuits, you generally have to prove harm in order to have legal standing to bring a lawsuit. And so this is a form that we are using to collect your first person accounts of harm that has been caused to you. This is not for, I saw ICE driving over the speed limit by the ICE arena. This is where they've actually caused harm to you. We will not be able to respond to every single one of the submissions, but we do have people reading every single one, and they will be the foundation for lawsuits as we're able to bring them. And that's kind of my update from our office.
All right. So I think there was a question from Roxanne who asked a question around that it's our understanding that the temporary injunction was not granted. Is that right, or are we wrong? And the question is, if it was not granted because there was a lack of proof, can you speak to that? And I'm not sure if that's the basis, but if you can just fill us in on that, Karen.
So for our case, we don't know the reason officially that it was not granted, but our analysis is that the court is invested in doing a very, very clean and thorough process that will be stronger to resist an appeal. And so, like I said, while we did not get our TRO immediately, the hearing for that is next week, and we anticipate that the judge will work thoroughly on it.
And one of the things I did hear is that the judge wanted to make certain that she dotted her I's and crossed her T's because she is under great scrutiny. And we want to make sure that whatever is presented and whatever decision is made is based in solid reasoning, because there is this whole notion that it could be appealed. And the Eighth Circuit is a very conservative district area, and so they've been known, like for an example, to strike down a portion of the Federal Voting Rights Act as well, like Section 2. All right, so if you guys will remember to keep yourself on mute, that would be great. Let's see. One other thing. Whenever there's a lawsuit that is put forward, because one question that has always been asked of me is why I, Bobby Joe Champion, did not file a lawsuit. And I want you to know I do not have the standing to be able to file the lawsuit. That is for our chief executive officers with the Attorney General's office by which to do that. You want to speak anything about that, Karen?
I don't think I can say more about that at this point. I will address Roxanne, your questions about court watch and going to the hearing. I am not sure yet. I think we are not sure yet.
Oh yeah, bang me hard.
Okay. I think that
We need some people.
Somebody, can
I'm
y'all
not sure yet about the physical
Hey,
parameters.
we're asking everyone to go on mute, please.
can you remove that person?
Yeah, remote them.
We are working on it. Thank you. You all can keep going. We are muting and removing in real time. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll keep the public updated. We're just not sure yet what the court is going to allow with safety and other things.
Thank you, Karen. Senator, you have to unmute again. Sorry, the way our system, when we mute everybody, it muted you. So please just unmute.
Oh,
Thank
I was
you.
asking Roxanne if you have any more questions, because I saw that you had a couple questions in the chat, and I wanted to make sure that you got your questions answered.
No, thank you, Bobby. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions from anyone in the on the Zoom? If you have a question, please remember to use the raise hand button, because we want to make sure that we get you, okay?
We've got Andrew with a question, Senator.
All right, Andrew.
One of the things that's really been bothering me, I've seen conflicting information about this. What are the requirements for our CBP and our ICE people to identify themselves? As it stands now, it appears that there's no way to distinguish between ICE making an arrest or CBP making an arrest and a kidnapping. How is that? How should we handle that?
All right, so I think that might be a question for Commissioner Barnett, but if the AG's office has an answer to that, or should we defer that to Commissioner Barnett?
That's federal, and I would defer.
All right, so we'll keep that question tracked, and then we will see if there's someone who can answer that question. All right, Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
Yep, we've got Elizabeth and then Joseph afterwards.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm just curious, and I'm sorry if I missed this somewhere along the way and whatever, but I don't have a smart ID. I just have a normal driver's license, and my kid just turned 18 and doesn't even have a school ID. And I just noticed mine it says not for federal use. And I just got so scared because what do we do if they stop us and ask us for information?
So this is what I'm going to do, Elizabeth. We're going to have ACLU that's going to be that is going to speak shortly, and if you hold that question, we'll make sure that that question gets answered. Okay.
Okay, it's been weeks and I'm just waiting to hear something
Got it.
and we're so
Absolutely.
nervous and I haven't heard anything about that situation. So
No, your point
thanks.
is well taken. And Paul, can you just make sure that you put that down as a question as well as the question that Andrew, I think it was, that asked. Okay. All right. We're going to Joseph.
Yeah, thank you. I won't waste time because your previous questioner just asked the same question because I have a real ID which is supposed to meet federal standards, and from my understanding from Virginia, the ICE agents wouldn't accept that. So that's one question I have. The other question I have too, and this may be for the ACLU or the Attorney General's office, could ICE say I give them my ID? Could they be using that for a national database for some sort of action down the line that we don't know about?
All right. Karen, do you have a response to that, or should we leave that for the ACLU?
I think that's a good ACLU question.
All right. Joseph, we have certainly asked both questions with ACLU, and as well as if Commissioner Barnett might have an answer to that. Constant. Oh no, I'm sorry.
Good.
Constant, no, I should have gone to
Am-
Ambi,
Ambi and then Constance.
and then Constant. Ambi, thank you. We can hear you, buddy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Hello. How you guys doing today? I got a couple of concerns. One, I'm gonna start with is the purpose of them entertaining the city, which is more of a retaliation. I don't feel that any of this is lawful, considering before his presidency, during Biden's presidency, and others, he was more about attacking us for the George Floyd riot, and it seems like he's living on his word. He's standing on his word. And second off is that he entered this year with an executive order labeling fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. So now I'm looking and I'm watching deployed agents in the state of Minnesota. Right as he deployed this same executive order, he deployed people here, but they're not even interested in a weapon of mass destruction. And most of the zones that I've seen them go to, that's what's active in those zones. That's the people dying in those zones, suffering in those zones, are people, you know what I mean, that are under this weapon of mass destruction label that he's given this drug now. I'm trying to understand, how can we redirect some of their energy to actually face what he's labeled?
Well, let me just say that that's a really good question, and I'll take an attempt at it. One of the things that's true that this administration has defied all sense of reason. So things that we thought would be a guiding principle, they're not using it as a guiding principle. They are just, creating their own playbook, sometimes defying rights and laws. And so we have to continue to use the arm of the judiciary, and sometimes they don't always follow that. But we got to stay constant in trying to push that energy back in a different way. And what I'll do, Ambi, if there's someone else that wants to weigh in on that question, but I want to make sure that we get these questions in for Karen, who's with the AG's office, but we want to make sure that we answer your other questions as well. Okay?
So I got one more piece to add to that. I wrote up I do a lot of writing, so I wrote up some legislation already. I would like to forward to you and Agave and others that might be interested. It's kind of our own executive order for Minnesota to kind of show some direction to the president and his officers how to conduct Minnesota and actually handle some business that is necessary. So I got a couple of orders I wrote up I would like to share with you guys.
Yeah, please feel free. We said this at the top, and I think Representative Abaje said this too. If you have any ideas or any proposals that you'd like to submit to us, please do so. Some of those things, like an executive order, is usually for the governor as opposed to the legislature, but there are resolutions that we can come up with. There are a number of different things. So let's make sure that you provide us with that information, okay? I'm going to go to Constant now. Constant.
Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to take 1 minute, just since we're all here together, to let y'all know that yesterday I was threatened inside of my own front yard with obstruction and arrest by an ICE agent for blowing a whistle. I have a recording of it, but it was very scary, and that happened in North Minneapolis. And again, I was inside of my own yard on my own property, and the agent said that if I didn't stop whistling, he would arrest me. So this is very scary. I don't know if they're going to come back. I'm hoping not, but this is happening. And so I wanted to make sure that y'all know that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Constant, what we want to say to you, we're sorry that you experienced that, but that seems to be things that we're all experiencing and why we're all so unsettled. And we're unsettled because people are trampling on our constitutional rights. And so that's why we are proposing some legislation that you'll hear more about, where there could be a personal right of action if someone is violating against a federal agent or federal government if our rights are being trampled on. But we'll talk about that later and talk about other things that we are thinking about in real time. Thank you for that. And again, I'm sorry that you experienced that. All right. KB, do you have a question?
Senator,
Yes.
yep, Senator Champion KB asked me to ask his question because his voice, but I wanted him to raise his hand to be in queue. His question is, do we have to submit to face recognition by ICE? As one, he has two questions. That's one. So do we have to submit to face recognition by ICE? And then question number two, what remedies do businesses have since they're destroying a lot of the small businesses? That's his two questions.
All right, so the small business question is one that we'll reserve. And I'm gonna ask Paul. Paul, is the first question something that we should wait for you to be able to answer as you talk about know your rights?
I mean, it's a pretty quick and easy answer right now. That is, unless they have a warrant, no, you do not have to submit to a facial scan, because, it's similar to if they would, require your fingerprint to unlock something, for example. So no, like they can do it, but they do not have the right to do it, if that makes sense. They can't force you to do it.
All right, all right. So there we have. Any other questions of Karen from the Attorney General's office before we go to our next presenter? Seeing none, we are now, thank you, Karen, for everything. And you can certainly stay. We're not telling you that you have to leave because you are part of our community and we sincerely appreciate you being here. We'll now go to Commissioner Barnett. Commissioner Barnett, as I mentioned, is with the city. He is also a former Chief Justice, a Chief Judge. And so, Commissioner Barnett, can you tell us what's going on from the city's perspective, especially as it pertains to MPD, their policy around supporting ICE or not? Anything that you want to share with us that would be helpful. Commissioner Barnett.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Senator Champion. I think folks should know that we really are approaching this in three big buckets when it comes to what's happening here in the city. One is what you've heard from the Attorney General's office is the legal process in trying to make sure that, we are joined in lawsuits and preventing a lot of this lawlessness that's going on. So one big bucket is what can we do legally? The other one, which I think some folks has alluded to, and that is making sure that we're getting out accurate information. We know that the federal government is not always giving us accurate information. We're trying different avenues to make sure people are able to have the information that is accurate. And then the third big bucket for us, it comes to community safety and making sure that all of our departments, when you think of fire, police, 911, emergency management, neighborhood safety, making sure that they're all connected, coordinated, and collaborating at the local level with other cities locally, that we're connected with our county and state partners as well. To answer the question, Senator Champion, about MPD specifically, I think you all know that we have something called a separation ordinance. That ordinance doesn't allow any employees, including MPD, to engage in activities to support ICE civil immigration operations. But they do have a duty to protect our citizens and visitors. So I'll leave it there. And Senator Champion, anything else you want me to talk about, I will go in detail.
Can you also underscore that discussion around MPD's ability to arrest an ICE agent? And it's my understanding that it depends on whether they're on duty, doing an active performance of their duties versus off duty, and how that looks. So if you could speak to that, that would be helpful.
Sure. You all should know that normally if there was a warrant for a law enforcement officer, let's say there was a warrant for a St. Paul officer, law enforcement would work together to make sure that that person was arrested and taken into custody in a very safe way. They really would coordinate that very well. This unprecedented territory that we're in, and because of the tactics that we are seeing being used, where we believe violates the Constitution, puts our officers in a tough spot because you're trying to get the, I would say, average person to distinguish what is operating within their lawful duty versus not their lawful duty. So it puts our MPD officers in a tough spot, one in which we would not like to have armed officers in a standoff. We like to leave that to the lawyers. That's why we've joined the lawsuits to talk about the excessive force that's being used, violations of the Constitution, violations of the Fourth Amendment, 10th Amendment, racial profiling, and other things. But this does put our officers in a very tough position, and where they're really trying to do the duties that they've been, assigned and hired to do.
All right. So there was a question that was in the chat, which sort of connects with what we're talking about here. And Paul, you might be able to answer this as well. One person in the chat talked about, well, Paul, you made some comment about the First Amendment and Fourth Amendment. So if you could speak to that question and that response, and then also the question as to whether a person detained, if they have a right to their private attorney and how that works. Paul.
All right, and just to preface this, I'm not an attorney. I just do a lot of talking about this and working with the attorneys. But in short, the protections that legal observers have are the same protections that we all have, that specifically the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. First Amendment being that you have the right to record in public, you have the right to observe in public. Fourth Amendment is you have the right to not be arrested and be secure in your person for following the law. So that is something that they've been breaking, obviously. And with the temporary restraining order that our lawsuit just got yesterday evening, they've been put on notice that that is unconstitutional and unlawful, that they're arresting people for exercising their rights. So that's the protection that is, at least in theory going forward, that observers will have. Now, if they break that, and they probably will, to be perfectly frank, that's why it's incredibly important to continue to continue to report these incidents both to the AG and to us, so that we can continue this legal action and eventually wear them down.
All right, and so I think Michelle may have a question, so we can ask Michelle for her question, and then we'll get that answer before we go to Dr. Alexis Mann.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, I was wondering, why has ICE been allowed to be at our police precincts? They have been at the second precinct multiple times, and I don't know about the other precincts, but I for sure know about the second. And with that being said, what is the accountability then if they are breaking, what has been passed at the city?
Can I see you on that?
At the city area where they are not supposed to be on city land. Thank you.
So good question. So the first part of the question, we'll go to Commissioner Barnett, and then Paul Sullivan for the second part. Commissioner Barnett.
Yep, thanks for the question. The mayor has an executive order that ICE is not allowed on any city property. We know that they are driving into some of our city parking lots. We're making sure that we are noting that and keeping a record of it. They are being asked to leave once we're notified that they're there. They have not been allowed into any of our buildings. I know that the second precinct is one of them. In some of our other precincts, they've driven into the parking lots. One of the reasons that they are stating they're driving to the precincts is because people are following them. But we're asking them to leave once we know they're there.
All right, second part of the question, Paul.
I apologize. I was responding to a question in the chat. Could you say it again really quickly? The second part?
Let's see. I think the second part was around, at least someone put in the chat, if an order is broken, right? Because you talk about going back and forth in the court. We also heard, the Commissioner Barnett said in the executive order. But if it's broken, what is our remedy?
So very good question. So essentially it's kind of what I said earlier. We have this TRO now. Chances are, again, I can't say this definitively, but if Chicago, LA, Portland, or any indicator where it's been a fairly similar pattern just with the National Guard, they're gonna probably break it. We're gonna have them back in court. We're probably gonna break it again with increasingly narrow restrictions, essentially, until they eventually pack up their toys and leave. So it's it's going to take a minute, and it's going to take people continuing to report issues so that we can hold them to account to the federal court. But what we've been seeing is that when they get pulled back into court, they don't really have an answer for why they're continuing to break things, which, in turn makes the court be like, all right, well, you get to do even less now. So if that makes sense.
And I think there was a question earlier, if it wasn't asked about if someone is detained, their right to access their private attorney. Did you answer that earlier?
Yes, I didn't have a chance to answer that one. Again, I'm not an attorney, so if there are any attorneys that can speak more definitively to
You,
perfect.
so you do not have a right to a public defender because immigration law is civil, and so usually you are supposed to be able to have right to your private attorney. But unfortunately, sometimes people are not allowed to call their attorneys right away. I know the work that I've been doing with some of the immigration attorneys. When we hear about a family, loved one that has been taken, we have to step in and try to, first of all, locate the person, and two, push in order for them to have the right to their attorney. So we can continue to get you information about that if someone else wants to know about that work and what we're doing there. Dr. Alexis Mann, you're up.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry about the delay there.
No problem. Go ahead. Hello, can't hear you.
Okay, I'm back again. I'm sorry. Yeah, my question is around the presence of ICE in schools. And there was in St. Louis Park, there was a elementary school where they were outside of during dismissal. And so I'm just wondering what guidance is being shared for school leaders dealing with those issues. And then also there was a parent that was arrested at a bus stop, and there's children being separated from their parents as a result of the ICE actions. And so I'm just curious about what guidance is being shared and what's available for school leaders dealing with those types of issues.
All right, Paul, do you have an answer to that about what's being shared with school leaders?
As far as what is, once again, I'm sorry, I was trying to respond to a question in the chat.
Okay.
What was
So the question is, we know that ICE have gone to many schools, including Camden, North High School, some of the other schools, right? and the caller was asking if there's been any information shared with school leaders in order for them to know what their rights are and what sort of steps that they should take in order to try to protect their kids.
For sure. So I don't know who has been sharing information with school leaders. We've been trying to share information as much as possible. In general, schools do have the right to, designate spaces as private because, your kids are in there. They can't just waltz in there and do whatever they want. So it is incumbent upon the staff of the school to be the ones to assert, hey, you need to speak with the office, and you need a warrant. If you're going to be in our school space. If it's outside of the school and like the bus pickup line, that's much more challenging because there's a lot less they can do about it, if that makes sense. That's where people have been stepping up as observers mostly, because it's not as legally protected.
And just so you know that we've been trying to communicate with as many districts and as many people as possible in order for them to get the training and have that understanding as to what their legal rights are, in hopes that they will execute that and be prepared if and when ICE comes to their doorstep. All right. Maher?
Maher, yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for putting this together. I just wanted to share an experience we had in Hawthorne neighborhood regarding the city's policy that ICE is not allowed to stage on public property. Last week, there was an incident where there was clearly a single ICE vehicle at Farview Park. There was a park police officer maybe 20 feet away from that park. When confronted by the community, the park police officer said, I didn't know they were ICE. And he was then instructed that hey, they are ICE. And per policy, they're not allowed to stage on public property. And that park officer said he didn't know what the policy was. We went down to park police to ask them to report this issue, basically. And, they kind of relayed to us that it's really up to the officers to decide what quote unquote staging is in a public park, which we countered given the level of enforcement. It's reasonable to assume a single vehicle, at a park is reasonably staging. The pretext we get reading between the lines is Minneapolis police, park police have no appetite to actually enforce this, and the officer we spoke to also relayed they're in a tough position because even if they can confront ICE, ICE can tell them no, and they're not going to confront them and forcefully remove them from the park. This order is basically toothless, at the surface if your officers don't even have the willingness to enforce it. So I want to talk about, are you actually tracking instances where ICE is being asked, when your officers are asking ICE to remove themselves from public property? And their responses is my number one question. My number two question is, it implores city council as well as representatives, is they are violating the law. You need to start thinking outside the box in terms of ways to better support the community. The people at the front lines are community members right now. And I understand, our approach is to address these through the courts after the fact, but that's not sufficient. So I implore you, please think outside the box of ways to protect the community. One thing that comes to mind is you've built a wonderful surveillance network for the city of Minneapolis with license plate readers and cameras. Can you use that to report on the presence of ICE vehicles in the neighborhood to give citizens an early warning alert so they're not subjected to their constitutional rights being violated or physical violence? Thank you.
All right. Great. Two questions. We'll go to Commissioner Barnett because that sounds like two questions for you.
Sure. One, yes, we are tracking any interaction that our officers are having with ICE. We are continuing to track when they're on the property. I totally understand the frustration with the tactics that are being used in these situations with ICE, using all these fear tactics and intimidation. That's part of the lawsuit that we've joined. I'm not sure, what was the second part of the question, Senator Champion?
The second part of the question is whether you guys have set up a pretty good surveillance cameras across the city, and whether that tool can be used to notify neighborhoods when ICE is present in their communities. I believe that's what was asked. And Dr. Mann, did I get that correct?
Yes, and also I'm curious about what can we do with the about the children?
I'm sorry. It was Maher. I'm sorry.
Mayor, yes, you
Oh,
got that correct. Yes, yeah. You have a
okay.
surveillance
So,
network of
so, so,
license plate
so Dr.
readers
Mann,
and cameras. Could that be used to help the community give an early warning when ICE is in their neighborhoods?
go ahead. That's the question. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Commissioner. That's the
Sure,
question.
thank you. Just a little bit about the vehicles that they have. And I think most of you've talked about the changing of license plates and things like that. They're not normal vehicles in which we know right away who's that they're associated with ICE. So I'll just say that. So if you saw one of our unmarked vehicles and you ran the license plate, you would probably know right away that's Minneapolis MPD. The federal agents are, from my understanding, some of them are rental cars that they have. They're not necessarily associated specifically with the federal government. As far as the surveillance piece and being able to notify neighborhoods, I don't know that we actually, something I would have to go back and look at. I don't know that we have the capacity to do it in real time for you. You know what I'm saying? So, and we don't have cameras in every nook and cranny of the city of Minneapolis. We do have a fair amount of cameras that we're able to tap into. They're not necessarily MPD cameras. They're business cameras in which those businesses have allowed us access. But a lot of times we're asking for permission to look into that. But that's something that I will bring up in our next meeting with MPD about what type of things can we do to help warn communities if we know that ICE is there. So I'm going to take one step back to answer your question in a different way for you. Normally, before this surge in December, the way that we operated with any law enforcement agency that wasn't MPD is that they would, as a courtesy, contact our 911 center, right? So they would say, hey, just want to let you know, this is the DEA, and we're going to be at Lake in Chicago from 4 to 5, right? So that if anything happened and we were called to respond at that area, we would already know that they were there doing surveillance. The only complaint that I've had a lot of times is they didn't always tell us when they left, right? So we would have that courtesy to know that whether St. Paul or another agency was in the city of Minneapolis doing some type of surveillance. We have no communication with the immigration agents. So when they're there and you guys call 911 or you're filming, that's when we're first getting that notice the majority of the time. So I just let you know that we have no information from them that they're going to a particular area. We're knowing a lot of times because our citizens are calling 911.
I see that we got 3 more, and I want to make sure that your questions are for Commissioner Barnett, because then we'll go to ACLU, which will answer some of the questions around judicial warrants, identification, some of those things. And then I know Viviana would talk about DOPA, which is Declaration of Parental Authority, those sort of things. But I'm going to Ashley Bowden. Ashley.
Hello. I'm not sure exactly who this question is for, but I was wondering, have you guys came up with like a contingency plan so that we're not we're more proactive versus reactive in these type of scenarios?
So I missed it. Have we come up with what?
Like a contingency plan for in the future once this is all over?
Oh, yeah. So I can sort of answer that from our vantage point, from the legislative vantage point. When we start session February 17th, there will be a number of proposals that we're going to put forward, and we can certainly talk about those later, like make it illegal for law enforcement like ICE to wear masks, or for there to be a private right of action if someone's constitutional right, whether their First or Fourth Amendment right is violent. There would be a number of things, and Representative Abaje and Representative Lee can talk about that either now or later. Is there anything you want to add to that, Representative Abaje or Representative Lee?
No, I think, we'll be trying to do some backstop things once we get into session. I think for now, any plans, unfortunately, really do rely on the community working together. I know there's a number of groups already forming that are working together to help provide information, supplies, resources to folks. And so we can help folks tap into that if that's something that's of interest to you.
Yep, of now and in the future. Okay, Representative Lee, are you okay? Did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so just wanted to just quickly add that we are working behind the scene right now to figure out what are some of the possible legislation we want to introduce. I think I saw from Roxanne around the for example the use of toxics, air, like fire gas and whatnot. What we saw from the George Floyd. I think that's something that we want to explore again, and just know that we are looking at different legislation right now to start addressing some of the issues we're seeing in the community.
All right, Nemco Ahmed, welcome to our district. Nemco, do you have a question?
Sorry, I was trying to come out of mood. Thanks, Senator. Hi, everyone. My response was to someone who wanted to know how they can get involved. There's a lot of different groups. There's the Northside Rapid Response, where people share in terms of like what's happening in real time. So I encourage everyone to kind of maybe plug it into your blocks and also neighborhood groups. People are sharing constantly what's happening, and also resource sharing as well. There is people in the neighborhood who are currently stuck in their homes, are not coming out. They need some sort of assistance in terms of people delivering food. So please get plugged in those as well. Some of the churches are taking in food in terms of like, where they're doing deliveries and stuff. So there's a lot of ways that that we can all help and assist our neighbors. In terms of the schools, both Camden and Northside, I think could benefit from parents or organizing themselves in terms of helping immigrant families during pickup and drop-offs and so forth. So I think there's ways that we can all help one another at this moment.
And let me go to Viviana. Viviana, are you still there? Viviana, if you're still there, can you talk about some of the stuff, some of the things that we've been doing around DOPAs, power of attorneys, other things, if you're still there, unless I'll just call on you later if you're not here.
Yes, I'm here.
Viviana, the community champion. I called you a community champion earlier. So if you could talk about some of the things that you've been doing around food and delivery and what we've been doing around DOPA and power of attorneys, all the work that we've been doing.
Yes. So yeah, we started preparing for this as soon as the current administration was elected into office. So we have been distributing DOPA since early February last year. What a DOPA is, a delegation of parental authority. It gives the ability for you to assign an adult to take care of your children in case, both adults or whoever the caregiver is taken by ICE, detained, or whatever the situation is. The DOPA form allows them to do everyday things like register them for school, pick them up from school, take them to doctor appointments, things like that. So it is a valuable resource, and I can put it in the chat. The food delivery. So I have been working with DHH Church in South Minneapolis, as well as local food shelves from Haven Pantry by the Sanctuary Church to North Point food shelf as well. So when I first refer people to DHH, because they deliver thousands of boxes about 3 times a week. If they send me another message saying, I haven't received my food, we are out of food, then I start making a list, and then I shop for them either at Haven Pantry or at North Point. And then I do have volunteers that have said, I would like to deliver food. So then we just distribute the food, and individuals bring it to community members in need. So I'm very appreciative of that help. Anything else do you want me to touch on,
So,
Senator?
so just quickly, if you put your information in the chat, because there was a question, can churches get DOPAs or whatever that document is that you referred to? Because I was talking to them when I was at churches the other day about DOPAs and then also the um, power of attorneys. Because one of the things that you and I discussed and we talked to my immigration attorney friend about is that sometimes when a parent has been deported and the child is still left here, in order to reunify the child with the parent, there has to be authority for that identified caretaker to be able to travel with the child to reunite the family. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, so it really depends on, and that's what we also have in the letter is to make sure the family makes a plan, and make sure the family tells the child what the plan is. You know, right now we're seeing, like 2 days ago, I received a message of 3 kids that were left alone in a house and they needed food. And, you know, I later found out their aunt took them in. So now it just depends on what the family decides, if the aunt is gonna stay with them, or if they're gonna go back.
All right. So let me go to a couple questions and then we'll answer those questions because I still need to make sure that Paul is able to talk more about know your rights. He's been talking and interjecting things throughout, and that's good. I just want to make sure like the identification question gets answered. So maybe Paul, maybe you can answer that now. There's been a couple questions about ID and what ID people need to have and whether a certain ID is appropriate. Can you speak to that before we go to Luke?
For sure, yeah. So ID is a tricky one because legally in the state of Minnesota, you do not have to present your ID to law enforcement. So you are being, a crime, not an immigration infraction, a crime. Of course, what we're seeing is that ICE is not following this. So in general, if you are a U.S. citizen, even if ICE walks up to you and says, "Hey, your ID, prove you're a citizen," you do not have to do that. Oh, I'm breaking up. Shoot. Okay.
So what we'll do, Paul, until you get your stuff together, let me go to Luke and see if there's a question that he has for either Commissioner Barnett or someone.
Yeah, hi, thanks for acknowledging me again. I don't have a question. I have more of a response to some of the comments that Commissioner Barnett made. I appreciate that NIMCO in particular called out some of the grassroots efforts that are going on to protect our neighbors. There's also a grassroots effort that has been particularly effective right now to identify ICE vehicles and track their locations, even despite all of the illegal activity around switching license plates. And I know that license plates are not the biggest issue here, but the suggestion that MPD and the state police, with vastly more resources and vastly more technology at their disposal, cannot track and investigate the organized crime that is happening in our city is either disingenuous or uninformed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to Constant. Do you have a question? If you want to make a comment, we hope that you'll hold on to that towards the end because we want to make sure that if people have specific questions of the guest and others, we want to make sure that we get that information. But that was good, Luke, to also include some additional information. Constant.
Senator Champion, it's Howard. I can't raise my hand for a question, so please put me on cue.
All right. So Howard, we go to you after Constance. Okay, Constance.
Thank you, Senator. My question is also related to MPD because there has been a lot of conversation in the community about non-responsiveness to 911 calls when people are threatened with violence or kidnapping from ICE. I would like the commissioner to talk about what, if any, guidance 911 operators have been given in Minneapolis for how to deal with these calls.
Thank you. Commissioner, to that question.
Senator Champion, Commissioner Barnett had to hop off. And so I don't know if there's a representative here, but
okay,
he had to hop off himself.
We'll make sure that we write that question down, but anyone from the city wants to answer that question? Or if they know, or if they are willing to check into that?
And if not, I've got it noted and wrote down. We can follow up with answers.
Senator, this is Councilmember Vita here.
Yes.
Thank you for the question, Constance. I think the question was, are 911 operators being trained for calls that are coming in about ICE being in the community. And
No, it's how are they dealing with threats, and are they receiving specific instructions for how to deal with calls that deal with threats from ICE specifically?
threats from ICE? You mean like if a person calls in and said, I just been threatened by ICE?
Yes, like they're trying to
Yes,
take me
okay.
or somebody on my block, or, you know, threatening me with a tear gas canister, that sort of thing.
Yes, okay, I understand. I just wanted to make sure I understood the question. Yes, there has been training about the calls that are coming in from community members that are asking specific things about ICE, and MPD is being deployed to those calls when they can. I mean, we're talking about 3,000 ICE agents and 600 MPD officers 24 hours a day, you know, for the entire city. So they are being deployed when they can come to those calls, but it's unfortunate, but they are not making it to every single one of those calls.
And it sounds like to me that we'll make sure that we write this down and remind the city as well as if they would do some additional refreshers with 911 because it's an ever moving target, and it's unfortunate that Minnesota is the target of the strange.
All of this. And just to follow up a little bit more, Constance, this week I was in 911 going to talk to some of the 911 operators about the calls that are coming in. And what you're saying is correct. They are getting those kind of calls, and they're really trying to navigate through those calls and get out to emergencies. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of other things going on in our communities in addition to what's going on with ICE. So that, they're still getting in the regular 911 calls and those calls. And what some of the operators said to me is that they really are trying to navigate through those calls, get the police officers to the emergencies, whether it's ICE involved or not, and just to make sure people are safe overall.
Howard, you're up.
Good morning. We are the North Star. We're Minneapolis strong. We're going to get through this. We got the muscle memory. My observation from Annunciation, from 34th in Portland, 24th in Lindale, is that we need more psychological first aid that timely responds to help de-escalate. Wednesday night could have been a lot worse. And I didn't see the violence interrupter shirts. I called in for BCR. I called for the chaplains. I called for community medics. We got to be more responsive and de-escalate.
Thank you, Howard. I will say that I was there on Wednesday night. I did see some of the community violence interrupters. Not everyone. I did see a Mother's Love was there. I did see some others, but it was a chaotic situation and one that was created by a lot of unsettledness. But your point is well taken, and we'll continue to talk to others around how we can do a lot more de-escalation and prevention, because I do think that is a very important point. So thank you for that. All right, now I'm going to go now to Paul Sullivan, who can now do his presentation, answer some of the questions that have been put forward, because his presentation is one where we've been getting a lot of questions asked around identification. What are your rights? Can you blow whistle? Can you follow ICE? What should we do when there's the presence of ICE? All those sort of things. So, Paul.
For sure. And could I be given permission to share my screen? It appears that I requested it.
Yep,
Oh,
you
there it is.
requested it and I hit allow. It should be working now. Let me know if not.
Amazing. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
We can see a blank screen. Oh, there it is now. Know your rights.
Yeah.
There it is.
And we will share
Perfect.
this just before people start asking. We will share this afterwards. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. So, it's a fairly extensive presentation. I'm gonna try to get it down into amount of time that we have. But in general, we're going to be talking about a few things here. Your rights in general, that you need to know as your baseline. Warrants, which is an especially important piece of how ICE has been operating. ICE encounters is commonplace. So you're going to run into ICE and how to deal with them in those instances. Ways you can be prepared, both for yourself and for your loved ones. Oops, excuse me. And then ways you can help defend your community. And lastly, I'm going to give you all ways that you can help prepare with your loved ones at home. So In general, when we're talking about ICE and your rights, we use this mnemonic 4+1 to remember what is safe to talk to ICE about. Now, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, I want you to remember this 4+1. So the 4 basic rights: 1, am I free to go? Number 2, I want to remain silent. Number 3, I don't consent to a search. And number 4, I want to speak to an attorney. No matter what ICE asks you, these are the things that you can say safely and legally without incriminating yourself. You do not have to answer any questions that they ask you. You don't have to do anything until you're being detained, in which case you say, all right, I want to remain silent, give me my lawyer, I don't consent to a search. That's the 4. The +1 is especially important with ICE, which is I don't consent to your entry. If ICE comes to your door, they're going to try to get in unless they have a signed judicial warrant, which we're going to talk about in a second. You do not have to let them in. And that is the same for your vehicle as well. You do not have to let them in. So, like I said, you always have the right to remain silent. You never have to discuss your immigration status or citizenship status with ICE. So if they come up and ask you about it, you do not have to tell them. If you want to exercise that right, however, it's very important that you say so out loud. Because of how our legal system works, it only really becomes legible if you say it out loud. And that way, it's on camera if you're recording. If they happen to have some sort of recording device, it's on their recording device as well. For an immigration officer to stop you and ask for your documents, if you are a non-citizen, you are supposed to carry documentation with you and present it upon request to immigration officers. However, it does require for them to have a reasonable suspicion of a crime or a violation of immigration law to ask you, which means unless you answer any questions by them, they're going to have very little legal standing to ask you for your documents. Now, that's obviously been happening a lot anyway. So what in general the best approach for this is, I would say, again, I'm not an attorney and this isn't legal advice or personal advice, but in general, I would say is you do not volunteer that information. You have the documentation to back it up in case you are unlawfully arrested. That is probably the best way to go about that right now. Again, you don't have to answer any questions without an attorney present. If they question you or continue to question you, you just return to that right to remain silent and say, I want to speak to an attorney. Never lie about your immigration status or provide fake documentation because that can get you in even more legal trouble. Also, do not sign anything, citizen or non-citizen, do not sign anything unless you have spoken to an attorney. That's something that they've been trying to do a lot, which is get people to either sign away their right to be in the country, essentially, or sign away their rights at trial if you're a citizen that's been arrested. There are a few exceptions that are worth noting. If you're arrested by ICE, you do have the right to an attorney, but because they generally cover civil law, they do not have to provide you with one. So it's important that you are in touch with an attorney in front of that. Number 2, if in Minnesota, you do not have to provide your name to law enforcement unless they suspect you of a crime and detain you on that. But in other states, you do. So if you're traveling to like North Dakota or Wisconsin, ICE, part of Metro Surge, I've seen at least some activity on the western fringes of Wisconsin. In those states, you do. If an immigration agent asks to search you, you always have the right to say no. However, they may say, we suspect you have a weapon and pat you down anyway. It's important that you still say, I do not consent to your search, because that's how it's legible to the law later, but you do not have to consent to their search. Okay, warrants. A judicial warrant is what ICE needs to get into a building or a car.
Yeah.
That is signed by a judge. If someone could, okay, there we go. So yeah, those are narrowly tailored. They're going to have a name, a date, an address, a time. It has to have it signed by a judge within 14 days of its use. However, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, ICE is coming with administrative warrants or ICE warrants. These are issued by the agency itself. It does not allow them to enter any sort of building. It's not signed by a judge. So how this looks in practice, this right here is a judicial warrant. If they have this, they are able to get into a building, into a car, etc. But you can see at the top, it says it is United States District Court, and it is signed by a judge signature down there. It's been filled out. However, most of the time, this is what they have, if they have anything, which is, at the top, you can see very clearly it is not issued by a court. And down at the bottom, there is no line even for a judge's signature. It just says signature of authorized immigration officer. This is not legally binding as far as getting into a building. You do not have to consent to their entry, and you should not consent to their entry if they present an ICE warrant. Now, how this looks in practice when they come to your house. In general, they're going to come to your house, they're going to knock on your door, they're going to say, let us in, we're police, ICE, whatever. First thing, make sure that you identify that they are ICE. A lot of the time they try to lie and say they're police. They say they're, we've seen them say that they're like maintenance even. Just make sure that they're showing some form of identification, hold up a badge to the door. If they're not police, they're not going to have a police badge to show you. So do not open the door no matter what. I always like to joke a little bit that ICE is a little bit like vampires. There are rules that they are supposed to follow, but they will try everything that they can to get around that and trick you. One big example of that is if you open the door at all, in general, they're going to say later, oh, they opened the door for me. That was consent. They let me in. So you don't open the door whatsoever. You're not even with the chain on. Tell agents, I do not consent to your entry. If they have a warrant signed by a judge or if they claim that, it's them to either slide it under the door or hold it up to the window for your inspection. Do not open the door for them to take it. Read it super carefully. Even if it is signed by a judge, if any details wrong on it, if there's a typo, if the date is wrong, if the address is off by a bit, it is not valid. You do not have to follow it. If everything is correct, and ICE does have a judicial signed by a judge warrant, we recommend that it's better to have the person leave the house that they're looking for rather than have them come in, because there might be children, there might be elders in there that don't know their rights. And a lot of the time they go in and then they arrest everybody because they're all, oh, this is now we have other people that we're looking for too. If they don't produce a valid judicial warrant, and most of the time they're not, keep that door closed and you tell them, I do not consent to your entry. Sometimes they do force their way in. We have been seeing them kicking indoors. Make sure it's not fair, I know, but stay calm, do not resist. Keep saying your rights out loud. That's all you say the entire time. I do not consent to your entry. I do not consent to your search. I want to remain silent. I want to speak to an attorney. Lastly, make sure that children and elders know that you do not open the door or talk to ICE. That's very important. Now, all of these rights are mostly the same in a slightly weaker form if you're driving. The difference, of course, is that if you are driving and you're pulled over, you generally do have to present some form of like driver's license, proof of insurance, things like that. I would say still do not open that car door. If you need to crack down the window for them to see something, you can do that. But again, do not open it. Do not give them that entry. If officers ask to search your car, you always have the right to say no. Ask if they have a warrant signed by a judge. If not, you say, I do not consent to your search of my vehicle. If they continue to ask you questions, even if you have, satisfied all these things, that's when you come in with, am I free to go? Am I being detained? If they say yes, then you can calmly, safely, be careful, drive away. If they say no, you go straight back to asserting those rights. Passengers in the car are more protected than the driver insofar that they don't have to present any sort of like driver's license, proof of insurance, anything. They don't have to answer any questions by law enforcement. They do not have to show any documents or identification. And again, if they want to, if they ask, am I free to go? And the officer says yes, then in theory, they could simply leave the car. Maybe not the best right now, obviously, given how they were behaving, but workplace. Again, many of the things are the very exact same as with your house. The difference is that they need a judicial warrant or permission from your employer to enter a workplace. That's where it gets tricky because you don't have control over what your employer does or doesn't do. So if they do get into your workplace, it's the same deal. Am I free to go? If they say no, I want to remain silent. If they say yes, just walk away. Don't resist, don't run. They like to cause a lot of chaos when they get into workplaces. If they ask to search you, you can always tell them no. And that includes like your desk, if you have a locker, if you have a book bag, any of that stuff. If it's safe and you feel safe, write down as much information as you can, badge numbers, names, who they arrest, what they take, etc. You always have the right to record them as long as you're not obstructing them, no matter what they tell you. They will try to tell you that you can't. You can. It's a very clear First Amendment right. Very important for workplaces. Often they like to barge in and tell people to line up, documented and citizens on one side, undocumented on the other side. It is very important you do not have to move and comply with that order, because by moving your body, you are forgoing your First Amendment right because you are conveying information by moving your body. So it's very important. You don't have to move. If they try to force you into one line or another, don't resist, but do not convey that information with your body. Tell them that you want to remain silent. When it comes to employers' rights with ICE, employers are really very frontline when it comes to making sure that your employees stay safe. They have what's called a reasonable expectation of privacy in their businesses. It's a kind of mushy term. Essentially, what that does mean is that employers get to be the ones that say, hey, this is a private place. Only employees get to be in here. What are you doing in here? Or this is my place of business. I'd like you to leave unless you have a warrant. Very important to be aware of what counts as public versus private under the law. In general, places that like anybody can get to, so like the waiting room of like a hospital or like the, a coffee shop at the front where people are sitting, ICE can get in there because it's public. However, places that are private and marked as private are places that they do need a judicial warrant to get into. So it's very important that you mark as much of it as possible of your place of employment with signs saying, staff only, only staff beyond this point, etc. We're going to skip the Lake and Riley Act for now, just for the sake of time. Being prepared. If someone you know might be detained by ICE or is detained by ICE, as soon as possible, write down every detail. I know that can be hard. As somebody who has been arrested unlawfully, it's very hard to go through that trauma in the moment, but it's really important that you write down as much as you can, especially if you assert your rights out loud. Make sure that you make a note of this, especially if they ignore it. If you are arrested, do not discuss your immigration status with anybody, and that includes other arrested people. Even if you are a citizen, you're not discussing that. You're not discussing it in other languages either. There are ICE officers who speak Spanish, who speak Hmong, who speak Somali. If you're arrested and you're a non-citizen, make sure you're asking your attorney how a criminal conviction or plea can affect your immigration status. Not all attorneys are fully up in the know when it comes to immigration law, so make sure they're aware of that. If you have a green card, and in general, if you have documentation, you do need to carry it with you at all times, right now at least. I would avoid passports, as in foreign passports when possible, just because they see that and say, oh, foreign citizen, and then they try to detain you. Keep a copy of your immigration documents with someone you trust and with your family. Also, if you are undocumented, but you've been in the United States for more than 2 years, it's important that you have a file showing that. That can be like bills, receipts, anything like that. Because if you've been in the United States for less than 2 years, you're subject to what's called expedited removal, which is a much quicker and lower bar for due process when it comes to getting deported. So have a packet of materials somewhere safe if you are undocumented, but you've been here for more than 2 years. Obviously, talk with an immigration attorney before you encounter ICE. Make sure you memorize that number. And it sounds like others are going to cover this later, but consider creating a power of attorney or a DOPA. Make sure your family has the following information in case you're vulnerable to deportation: your legal name, your A number, if you have one, and your date of birth, attorney contact information if you have union and representative or just employer contact info. Make sure you have contact information for any person that is named in the powers of attorney or DOPA. And then lastly, you want to have the St. Paul ICE field office number, which covers most of the upper Midwest. That is 612-409-7799. That's what you're going to need to call to find the person who is detained. This is just information on DOPAs, which again is going to get covered later and will also be in the slides for people to look at later. Powers of attorney, again, same deal. Now, community defense. If you are a citizen, and especially if you are a citizen who is white or white passing, this is a moment where it is incredibly important that you step up to use that privilege to protect those around you who are not. I always like to tell people that, this is your permission to be your very best Karen self. Because yes, you get to be the person that is following ICE around. Our TRO that we just won does give you that right. You always had that right, and now at least there's some court, there's some legal teeth to it as well. You can approach them, ask, are they with ICE? Ask for ID, ask us to see the warrant. You always have the right to film them as long as you are not obstructing them. If they tell you to get back, obviously. Film yourself doing so. In general, the best thing that you can do to keep your community safe is to draw that attention to ICE. Loudly follow agents around the neighborhood until they leave. There's nothing saying that you can't shout know your rights information to houses they approach. Things like, don't open the door. It's ICE. Just keep asking them what they're doing and why. There we go. So many of you would probably already know this. The best thing that you can do is carry a whistle with you. If you hear whistles, get outside, see what's happening, form a crowd, and stay loud. A lot of the time, we're seeing ICE back down because they don't have a judicial warrant and they don't want that pressure. Obviously, they're not always risk-free because they are also arresting and brutalizing people sometimes who do respond. But the more people that are out there responding, the safer generally people are going to be. When you're talking about ICE in a community chat in something, one best practice that is really important is what's called salute. And this is to avoid having something that's just like, you know, getting a message that's like, I think I saw ICE. What do we do? Help. That does nothing. That doesn't help anybody. What you need to do instead is make sure that you have concrete information so that people can respond to it. So that includes like how many agents and vehicles, size, activity, what are they doing, location, especially across street, uniform, what are there, is there a uniform even, time and equipment, what gear or weapons. Some resources for you. In general, for immigrants, if there's an immigrant that has been taken by ICE, the numbers that we recommend calling are Monaca or Copal. Those numbers are there, and again, they'll be in these slides later for people. If you need legal support as an immigrant after being detained, CARE has a 24/7 hotline. ILCM and MMLA also have business hour support for people who've been detained. For observers, it's very important that you report observer arrest to the National Lawyers Guild because that's how you're going to get a lawyer visit. And that's how you're going to get information to your loved ones. So that's 612-444-2654. I honestly recommend just writing it on your body if you're going to be out dealing with ICE, because if you're arrested, you won't have access to your phone. For both, make sure that you report observer rights violations, especially now that we have this TRO, so that we can document violations of the TRO to the ACLU at aclu-mn.org/ice-feds it's like a form. Also to the AG's office now that that link is live and it's been put in the chat a few times. I would recommend reporting it to both. So just to end, we're going to go over those rights one more time. If this was a live session, I would do some call and response, but given time, etc., we're not doing that. Number 1, am I free to go? Number 2, I want to remain silent. Number 3, I don't consent to a search. Number 4, I want to speak to an attorney.
All right, Paul. I have a couple of questions that were on they were in the chat, and I want to make sure that you have a chance to react to. You were talking about the rights at home, the rights in the car, but someone said, well, what about rights when you're on the city bus? Is there anything different about what they should do if they're on the city bus?
On the city bus, yes. So on the city bus, I would treat that as essentially just a public venue. So like it's kind of similar as if you're walking down the street. I don't believe that they need any sort of warrant to get on a bus because again, anybody can get on the bus. It's very public facing like that.
All right. And the next question was, when you talk about identification and what you should have, someone put in the chat the question, can we use a photocopy?
Excuse me, I'm just moving to try to plug in my laptop. You can have a photocopy. The strongest is generally going to be the document itself. So if you are able to carry around the document, be best. Again, I'm not an attorney, so I can't make that legal advice, but that is what I would say.
And then someone was asking about the documents being sent. We already clarified that we will send those documents so that you'll have that. What about racial profiling, right? Because we know that there's a lot of racial profiling, and are we suggesting that even if there's racial profiling and we feel offended by that, that we still should adhere to some of the advice that you have provided? What do you say? And then I will go to Marquita Stevens.
Short that we are very aware that yes, they are racially profiling people. Actually, we have a current lawsuit that we filed, I think, this week to stop them from racially profiling people and prove that they've been doing it. In general, yes, all of these are going to remain, even if you feel like you've been profiled, keep silent, have that ID ready in case you're detained. And I would very strongly recommend reporting that both to ACLU and to the AG so that we can prove it's happening and get further legal injunctions to stop them doing it. It is illegal for them to do it. They are still doing it. That's why, again, have that ID ready for an unlawful arrest if you need it, and report it.
All right.
Senator Champion, Senator
yeah.
Champion, before we go to the raised hands, there's the one question I think from Elizabeth about a federal ID versus a state ID, like the real ID issue. Paul, I don't know if you have more information on that, but my understanding is that as long as you have an ID, even if it's a state level ID, that should be honored. Obviously, we know that they're not honoring a lot of stuff, but that is legal and valid. Is that from your understanding from what ACLU is telling people? Is that correct?
My understanding, again, that is correct. It does not have to be a federal ID. If it's issued by the state, you should be okay.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that that question got answered. There's a couple other stuff in the chat. I'm trying to monitor the chat, and when I can, I'll put
Go
stuff
ahead.
in.
No, go ahead and ask if there's some other things in the chat that I'm not seeing, Representative.
I think. No, I think that's it for now. If there's anything else, I will
Okay.
pop back in.
Yeah, just pop back in. Of course, you are leader in this whole town hall meeting, so you can pop in anytime. Marquita Stevens, your quick question, and then we'll go to Alfred Babington Johnson.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the flu, so I won't be on camera right now, but I thought this was important and wanted to tune in. We had an employee that was detained and released after 8 hours. They took his ID, but did not give it back to him at the point of release. Does he, what does he do in that situation? Because now he is out here without an ID. Does he get a copy? What happens?
Paul, any advice?
Yeah. So I think the short answer to that is get an attorney involved and also your electeds involved. We have been seeing sometimes that pressure from elected officials directly to ICE has been helping people get their IDs back because they are supposed to be giving them back, obviously. It just takes more pressure. Essentially. So I would get in touch.
And we're still having a little problem with your clarity. But if you pace yourself a little more, maybe that might help us. Alfred Babington Johnson, the floor is yours.
Thank you again, Senator Champion and Senator Bajay, Senator Lee. Thank you for this extraordinary, helpful session. Mr. Sullivan mentioned the TRO that was recently won, and I wasn't on from the very beginning, so you may have already covered that, but you alluded to the fact that it provided some support for some things that are currently happening or some things that could happen in the future. Is there a way that could be synthesized? What came out of the TRO?
Yeah, he didn't talk about that. That was talked about by the Attorney General's office earlier, and they're going to send us that documentation and we'll share it with you. Okay, synthesize that there's an upcoming hearing on January 23rd that is very important, that I think the ACLU got a temporary injunction. So Paul, can you speak to that portion?
Yes, so for the temporary restraining order, injunctive relief from last night late actually, essentially the federal judge outlined that ICE is not allowed to retaliate or use chemical irritants against people who are lawfully using the First Amendment rights to observe them in public, or that they are not allowed to detain or arrest people who are essentially following them in their vehicles as long as they are not physically obstructing them, as long as they are following all laws. That is a valid form of protest, and they can't legally people who are doing these things. Once again, they're probably going to violate this, and that's why it's important that we keep documenting this so that we can keep hauling it to court, so that following the it's probably,
Hey, Paul, if you could like slow down just a little bit when you're explaining, because you are coming in and out.
Okay, good. Yes, essentially now, yeah, people have people's right to record them in public has been affirmed. Vehicles, as long as they're not breaking any laws or obstructing them physically, has been affirmed. If they break those things, please report it to us. We're going to keep bringing them into court for it.
Thank you. We will go to Viviana, your question, and then Cindy.
Thank you. My question is, what is the recommendation if someone needs to renew their passport, should we carry a copy of our birth certificate along with a copy of our passport that we have to mail in?
Paul, are you with us? Let's see. I know he.
Yes. I'm not sure if I have a great answer to that one. I would say, yeah, keep the documentation that you have on your with you when you can. An expired passport is still a federal document until you get the one that replaces it, is my understanding. So carry that around until you have. Oh wait, yeah. Does it make sense?
Yes. Viviana, did that answer your question?
Yeah, but you have to mail in your passport.
Not
to-
anymore.
Not
No, not anymore. I actually just updated my own passport, so the State Department has updated some of its rules. So I think if you're go on the State Department website, I'll find their website and put it in. But if you're within a certain time frame of your passport expiring, you can renew your passport online, which means you don't have to send it in. They will then, if you qualify, you have to fill out a form to make sure that you qualify. You send in your picture, send in all the information, then they'll let you know that you qualify and then they'll process the renewal of your passport, but you don't have to send the old one in. So I'll find that link, I'll put it in the chat. But I think as Paul was saying, and as a lot of folks have been saying, it's really important that if you are a US citizen and you feel the need, carry your documents with you. It is true, there's no federal law that says US citizens have to have their papers on them. That is not a law in this country, which is why you've probably been seeing videos of people pushing back saying, I'm a US citizen, I don't need to show you anything. As Paul did say, if you are not a citizen, but you are an immigrant, it is now recommended that you have those papers with you at all times. Um, it's terrible. Like, I just want to acknowledge that it's terrible that this is the situation that we're in. But if you feel more comfortable carrying your ID with you, if you're a US citizen, you can do that, whether it's a copy of your passport or, a copy of your birth certificate or something. But there is no law that says a US citizen has to provide papers.
And let me say this, and then we'll go to Cindy. Because ICE have been very aggressive and very aggressive with US citizens as well, and because they're racially profiling, they don't always know, nor are they interested in really knowing. So I would just say for us to be as careful and as thoughtful as possible and whatever you feel comfortable doing, because I'm telling you, we've had Susan Tincher, we've had others where even through whatever their activity was, which was, constitutional, they were detained, right? And they were they're in the detention center. So let's just be thoughtful because we have a group of people who are not trying to be lawful. All right. All right, Cindy.
Thank you so much for doing this, Senator Champion. I have a question about the signs that we see on businesses that say no federal agents are allowed without a warrant. So specifically, like a union hall or an adult training center or a hardware store, like, do those signs mean anything? Do they work?
Paul, you want to speak to that?
Yes, I can speak to that, and then I do have to leave, unfortunately. But my understanding is that it isn't, like I said, when it comes to that reasonable expectation of privacy, it is incumbent upon a business owner to be the one to assert that if ICE does try to come in. So essentially, by having that up there, it puts them on notice that, like, yes, if you try to break this, the business owner is going to come in and tell you to get out. So if that makes sense.
And we did see a video of that with a person at McDonald's where the security guard really pushed back on ICE and was asking them where their warrant is and saying that you can't enter this business without a warrant. I'm now going to go to Kathy before we get ready to close.
Yes, hi. I have an incident happened where a person had their papers, ISIS stopped them and they tore them up. And my question is, how can a person re-get their documents? It was the original. So going forward, should a person carry the original documentation with them? and they don't know how to get a copy of it, and they were told that they had to reapply to get a paper. So they're like confused.
All right, Paul, you want to take a stab at that? I know you did say something about that earlier, that the recommendation was to carry the original if you can, but a photocopy, I guess, would suffice. But it was probably better, or the advice to, carry the original. But Paul, correct me where I'm wrong and expound where you think it's necessary.
Yes. So some of this is going to boil down to what sort of risk assessment you want to have for yourself. If you think that you're probably going to be okay having a copy, and that, a loved one, if you are unlawfully detained, a loved one can come and bring it to you in detention. That's one route. If you aren't confident in that ability, then carrying an original might be another route that you could follow. I'm not sure about apply. I'm not well versed in how one applies or one gets those documents if they've been destroyed like that, or what legal recourse there is. That might be another person's question. And then I do unfortunately have to hop off for another event. But thank you so much.
Paul,
Yes.
thank you. I think there's one last question, and you can certainly hop. I'm so serious because I know you've been here longer than I roped you in for, and I sincerely appreciate you being here, Miss Sybil.
For sure.
If it's a simple question that Paul can answer, because we need to wrap up, because I've taken more of your time today than I was supposed to.
Yes, very quickly. Now, someone did mention it in the chat about those individuals that had their windows broken in by or broken out of by ICE, or even their doors busted down. Is there some type of program that help them replace there, or they have to go through legality to pay for that themselves? Would the city reimburse these individuals? I think that's a good question to ask.
Anybody on the line know that question? But I know that as a lawyer, usually if somebody does something they're not supposed to, including the city or any governmental entity, that you have to sue them. But I don't know if there's a direct mechanism by which to try to get that grievance addressed. Is there anyone else on the line, including Paul, that knows the answer to that question?
I unfortunately do not know the answer to that one. I defer if there are any lawyers in the chat.
All right.
Senator
And
Champion, I actually think that might be a legislative thing we may need to think about this session, because I don't think there's anything about that.
perfect. So just know that we will, look into that. And if this is a legislative issue, we'll certainly bring that forward. Paul, I've taken up too much of your time, and we all want to thank you. No matter what district that we've come from, we've all gathered around in order to make sure that we can get these questions answered. And I hope that you all have enjoyed this, enjoy getting the information. We're not enjoying the experience of needing to have this emergency town hall meeting. But John has his hand up, and I want to make sure that he can say something. Then I want to go to the Representative Abaje, just so that, and others, just so we can.
One more thing though, just before we go to John, I know Bantu was here from North Point. If she's still on, if you quickly can just talk about the North Point food shelf and some services.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. That was on my notes and I just totally overlooked it. Bantu, are you still with us?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you. Sorry about the delay.
Thank you for the delay. Thank you for being present. Thank you for all you all do at North Point, and we sincerely just thank you with all of our hearts. So if you want to talk about the food shelf and anything that can be done in order to help folks at this time.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite and for putting this together. Our food shelf is operating as normal. We are open on Mondays and Wednesdays from 10 to 4. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're open from 10 to 7. And we're closed on Fridays. What we've been seeing recently is a lot of proxy pickups that are happening. So if you know a family that is in need of food and they're afraid to leave their residence, please feel free to come to our food shelf. All we need is the household numbers, how many people are in the household, how many children, and how many seniors. That is all the information that we need in order for you to do shopping. We do advise that individuals do come in the afternoon, especially if you're shopping for more than 2 families. It's usually quieter in the afternoons, especially during our extended hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're open till 7. If there is a large group of families that you will be shopping for, if it's more than 5 families, we're more than happy to have a conversation how we can accommodate it and make it easier for anyone who's shopping for families as well. And if there's any other ways that we, can collaborate within the community to make this even better, we're happy to have that conversation. We're just looking at staff capacity and how we can meet all the needs that are currently being brought up by our community members, but we're also working with schools to make sure that food is getting to families that are not leaving their residence as well. So if there's any questions, I'll be here, and I will also put in the chat the link to our food shelves website.
And I see that Nimco has her hand raised, and I want to say earlier I welcomed her, and I want to make sure that she didn't feel like I was calling her out, but because I love Nimco so much as a great friend that I've known forever, so I wanted to make sure that that was stated on the record, that it had no ill intent. I just like welcoming people that I know, period. Nimco, did you have a question?
No, I just had a comment to that, Senator. Thank you so much for actually commenting on that. This is a crucial time in our country, and words really matter. For someone like me, who's an immigrant American in this country, welcoming really hurts at this moment. And I have every right to be in this chat. I have every right to be in this country, just like everyone else. And I just thought I'd point that out. Thank you so much, Senator.
And I want you to know that that's absolutely right. And sometimes when we are in this moment, I don't want to neglect us showing love for each other and being mindful of things. But I also hope that we would look at history with each other, right? Our love for each other, not allow the outside forces of the federal government and everyone to turn us against each other, right? And start redefining things. We have to step forward and continue to be our loving, wonderful selves with each other. So to me, that's important. So thank you for that comment. And I hope that you receive my heartfelt apology if you felt a certain way. I just want you to know that that's consistent with our love for each other, and that was not anything else. John, you have a question, and then we'll go to Joseph, and then Harday. Okay, there you go, John, and then Joseph.
Actually, this is more of a comment, Bobby, in regards to like if your window is broken out. I would say right now everybody should be looking at their insurance contracts, contacting their agent or the insurance company, and select the glass coverage on that policy if it's not selected. That way, you can actually get it replaced right away. And then if you need to do any kind of civil issues to do that. The other thing I want to also let people know, if you're driving through an area and they're using some sort of chemical something and you don't want to inhale that, you might want to change your selector on your blower to not bring in the air from outside. So that way it will help protect you a little bit from that sort of chemical munitions that they're using.
All right, we're going to Joseph. Thank you for that information, John.
John just hit the point that I was just going to make. Check your insurance policy because there may be coverage. First of all, I'm no longer a licensed agent, but check your insurance policy because there may be coverage because of governmental action. And the other thing is, as far as legislation is concerned, I know we've talked about a digital driver's license. The fact is, if ICE were to snatch your phone, there goes your ID. So you may need to look at some type of legislation that says, yeah, we can have a digital driver's license, but we still retain a hard copy.
All right, Signa. And I hope I pronounced her name correctly.
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's pretty close, Senator. That's fine. This is Signe Heraday with Pillsbury United Communities. And just wanted to alert people to, if you scroll up in the chat, I added additional food resources. We operate 3 different food shelves and 3 different cafes for hot meals for free food for community. And we're doing some meal delivery. But maybe the biggest thing for Northsiders to know is that we're going to use North Market Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 9:30 as a drop-off place where we can organize deliveries and then distribute them out not only to our food shelves, but other folks who are in need. So stay tuned, and we'll start that on Tuesday. So just wanted to let this community know. And thank you to all the electeds and especially Senator Champion for hosting today's conversation.
Thank you so much. Andrew, your question before we go to Kim.
We saw some great slides from our ACLU person, and I would love to have those to use for my friends and so on, reproduce for people. Before you close, could you post or show us the website or web address that we will have to go to get those slides? Then we can all take a screenshot and we'll be able to know how to find them and how to make them available to friends and family and so on. Is that possible?
Yeah, we will. If Shamika will put our information in the chat, Shamika or Taylor, and once we get that those slides from ACLU, we'll send them directly to you. And we have mentioned, and we mentioned at the top that we would do that. So we'll certainly get you that information because we think it's important for you to know it and then pass that information on to others. Kim Smith, you're up. Kim. All right, Kim might.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was having trouble with the phone. Several people have mentioned North Market, and I was told that North Market could be potentially closing at the end of this month because they need new investors. So is it truly going to be a place where it can be staged?
Yes.
They're currently like, go ahead.
No, Kim, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
I talked to a couple of the managers there, and they are actually like trying to sell everything they've got. Every day it's 50% off all produce, 25% off all meat items. And they said they may be closing at the end of the month and hopefully reopening sometime during the summer if they can find new investors. Do you have any information about that to verify, confirm, or to confirm it, or say that
Senator
is not
Champion,
true?
would you like me to respond to that?
Yeah, Senator Champion, you also have to re-unmute because we muted someone. But yes, Pillsbury is on.
Yeah. So she's from Pillsbury United, and she can speak to that from the North Market. Go ahead, Sydney.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much for the question, Kim. My name is Signe, and I work at Pillsbury United Communities, and North Market rolls up to me. Yes, the store is pausing operations at the end of the month, but we will be continuing to host community meetings, and Wendy's House of Soul will be operating through the month of March. And we will still be activating the space. And throughout the month, you can look forward to information around connecting to have conversations about the future of the market during the month of February. I'll put my email in the chat too. If anyone on the call wants to reach out directly to me to have questions, I'll be hosting office hours at North Market throughout the month of February as well.
And Kim is Lynn Park's neighborhood leader. And so she's been doing a lot of work around, keeping up with the neighborhood, and she and I have been talking, and I've been doing some surveillance around and walking around Masjid Anor, and so she's just an amazing person. So thank you. And not to mention that she's a part of the bike club, and she never would teach me how to ride the bike. So I just want you to know a motorcycle club. Okay. All right. Anything else? Oh, if not, I'm going to Representative Abaje for closing comments or anything else that she wants to say that we haven't covered. Representative Abaje.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator Champion. I really appreciate you bringing everyone together. I think the biggest thing to know, yes, this is definitely a space of fluid information. We will continue to try our best to get information out to you as timely as we can. There are also other methods across the city and state that are happening. I know the city government now has started a joint briefing with Hennepin County officials, school board officials, state officials, city council officials. That'll be happening weekly. The next one is on Wednesday at 12 noon. It's on YouTube and it will be shared out on different networks. So please look out for that. I think also just keep up with online things that you see, community organizations, especially those closest to the ground, some of our legacy organizations. I think more organizing and more coordination is happening. But as always, feel free to reach out to our offices, especially if you see something that you're unsure about, that you don't know. We will help you try to verify that information, or if that information is incorrect, let you know that it is incorrect. Again, We're all in this together. Please stay strong. Please stay resilient. Drink water, eat, take care of yourself. We need you on the ground in order to be able to help us get through this, and we will get through this. Thank you.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Senator Champion, and thank you everyone for joining us. Echoing what Representative Bache said, if there's ever anything that's going on at the state level that you need assistance with or have questions about, feel free to reach out to the three of us, and we'll do our best to get you the information. And just know that we are here with you. And as we head into the legislative session in February, we are looking at how can we assist our community even more. And so just be in touch. Thank you all.
And I know that Nimco Ahmed asked, can we create a group for everyone here where we can share information? That would be a Shamika question. And so Shamika would have to work on that and make that happen, because you certainly don't want me trying to do anything technological.
We will work on some ideas, and NIMCO, I can connect with you if you have ideas and suggestions, and then I'll work with all of the offices to see what we can put together. Thank you.
And let me go to, before I go to our city council members, Viviana, is there anything you want to say in closing? Because I know you've been doing a lot of work on the ground.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. And I know this is a horrible situation, but I have seen a lot of good. I have seen a lot of people coming together and helping each other. So I want to say thank you. And I do have the DOPA presentation in English and Spanish. If anybody's interested in sharing with the school, with your friends, coworkers, let me know. Happy to share it. So thank you.
And a question was asked in the chat if this presentation today and gathering has been recorded. It's my understanding we did record it, and Shamika will also be responsible for how that gets posted, and so you can share it with others. All right?
Senator Champion. Sorry, can I just say it out loud really quick, because I realize not everybody knows how to navigate the chat. If you do not receive Senator Champion's newsletter already, that's how we send out the items, or you can either email us. Also in the e-blast that we do, that will include the presentation from the ACLU, what Viviana was discussing, this chat history, and the recording of this, that will all be in there. We will also include contact information for each of the offices that were on here. So Councilmember Vital and Councilmember Warren's office, Rep. Abaje and Rep. Lee's offices as well. So just want to make sure that if you have not looked in the chat, to use that link to sign up or to grab Senator Champion's email, that you do that before we end. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Councilmember Vita. Any closing comments?
Thank you, Senator Champion, and thank you, representatives, for co-hosting this. Thank you, Northside, and all of our other residents who showed up to help us with this. I put it in the chat, but I also wanted to share, because Viviana brought it up. Her and I've been working together since the beginning of last year. My new office is located at 2140 44th Avenue North. I do have the forms that you all can fill out there. My office is available for community members and organizations to use for free if you need a space to gather, so that we can make sure the information that we're sharing in a lot of these chats and, on our own text threads are getting out. My office is available. I'm so happy to see Signe here, because we've been talking a lot about how we can use North Market to be a resource for folks, and North Point, where my career started, has been doing a lot of work to make sure families are getting food. And so I'm just so grateful that the North Side always comes together like this. Thank you so much, Viviana, for leading this work last year and continuing to make sure that our families are safe. I'm here, and Councilmember Warren is here. If you need anything, I know there's some parks commissioners. Commissioner Rucker is on the call as well. And so if you need any of us, please feel free to reach out. Senator Champion, you are always a champion for this community. Thank you so much for organizing this and making sure that Northsiders have a place to talk about what's going on in this community, and we're able to listen and spring into action like we always do. Thank you.
Thank you all. And let me say this, City Council Member Warren's voice is gone. And so she asked Councilmember Vita to say something on her behalf, because when she was talking to me earlier, she really did sound like Barry White. So if anyone knows who Barry White is, that's what she sounded like. So anyway, I want to thank Shamika. I want to thank Taylor. I want to thank Maggie. I want to thank all the other staff from all the other electeds. Even if I didn't name them, just know that that we appreciate them and we appreciate all their work. And we cannot and could not do this work without them. They are the, you know, it's corny to say, but it's true, the wind beneath our wings. They help us soar in order for us to make sure that North Minneapolis and every part of our state is well represented and protected. Thank you so very much, and I wish you well, and thank you for giving us more time than what we were supposed to, but we wanted to be patient enough to make sure that we could be here and stand in the breach. God bless, and keep the faith.
Yes, Northside
You see
strong.
my sign, I'll say keep the faith. Thank you so much. God bless.
Recording stopped.